She didn't destroy you. She just showed you the place inside yourself where you were already bleeding but too proud to look. That's the truth most men aren't ready for, not because it's complicated, but because it's forbidden. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Schopenhauer wasn't bitter, he was precise. He said what others wouldn't dare, that romantic love, as men imagine it, is a hallucination, dressed in poetry, driven by instinct. And Jung, he opened the darker door. You don't fall in love with women. You fall in love with your projections, your lost soul reflected in her body. She didn't betray love. She fulfilled biology. You mistook instinct for intimacy, and now you're calling nature a liar. But maybe this pain isn't a punishment. Maybe it's a mirror, a ruthless invitation to stop worshipping the illusion and start facing the one who built it. This video is not comfort, it's confrontation. Because until a man stops chasing his mother through women's eyes, he will always call betrayal what is actually just the end of fantasy. She didn't become someone else. She returned to who she always was. You just stopped hallucinating. He called it betrayal, but it was biology correcting his poetry. She wasn't hiding, he just refused to see. And when the veil dropped, he mistook truth for treason. He wanted her to be a stone, a monument to love carved in permanence. But she was a river, changing, retreating, wild. The wound wasn't her absence, it was his addiction to consistency. He thought real love never shifts, but real nature never stays still. And in trying to hold her, he squeezed the life out of the illusion. He chased the potential he saw in her eyes, not the pattern in her actions. He remembered the warmth, forgot the storms. She never lied. He just built a temple on moments that weren't meant to last. He thought devotion would tame her chaos. But no goddess bows to a man who forgets she has seasons. She told him in silence what her lips never could. Her pullback was the answer he ignored. Every touch that felt different wasn't betrayal. It was transition. The truth is, she was always moving. He just didn't want to follow. And when she left, it wasn't sudden. It was slow erosion. He stayed in denial, looking for the version of her that only existed in his mind. He scrolled old messages like they were scripture, hoping to resurrect her. But ghosts don't come back when summoned by desperation. He wasn't mourning her. He was mourning his own blindness. He had loved an echo, not the voice that cast it. A man doesn't break because she changed. He breaks because he can no longer believe in the lie that once gave him comfort. He saw her as a refuge, not realizing she was just passing through. He needed her to be stable, so he didn't have to confront his own emotional chaos. But love that depends on stillness is just avoidance in disguise. The betrayal wasn't hers. It was his, against himself. He silenced every doubt, excused every shift, ignored every scar, because admitting she was different meant admitting he was wrong. And that truth, it burns harder than her absence. But it's also the beginning of masculine clarity. She didn't change. The spell did. And what felt like collapse was actually the first honest breath he'd taken in years. Now comes the silence, and in it, the next revelation. She touched his face like it meant something, but only when the world was against her. Her affection was a currency, spent when she felt unsafe. And he, starving for meaning, mistook it for devotion. He never asked, was she loving or just surviving? He believed in her warmth because he needed to. She wasn't a liar. She was opportunistic, not malicious, just wired for preservation. He offered shelter, and she called it love. But once the storm passed, so did her tenderness. He thought she was his, because she cried in his arms. But those tears weren't sacred. They were strategy. He had value in the crisis, but none in the calm. And when peace returned, so did her distance. He thought they had bonded. She just needed a place to hide. Some women love like animals, instinctively. They respond to danger with submission, to safety with escape. He mistook her fear for passion, her dependency for depth. She clung to him not because she adored him, but because she feared the fall. And once the ground felt solid, she ran. He thought he'd earned her, but she was never his prize. He was her parachute. She kissed him like a savior, then treated him like a stranger. She didn't need him to lead, she needed him to shield. And when the arrows stopped flying, she no longer needed the armor. She didn't fake her affection. It was just temporary, conditional, survival-based. And that's what shattered him. Not the loss of her presence, but the exposure of her intent. She gave what she had to, not what she chose to. He wasn't her desire. He was her emergency exit. This is the curse of men who confuse usefulness with value. They mistake being needed for being loved. They perform, provide, protect, hoping it will spark something real. But alliance is not affection, and no amount of sacrifice will make her stay when she no longer feels threatened. So now he sits in silence, remembering how alive he felt when she held him, not realizing he wasn't being loved. He was being used beautifully, and when he stopped being useful, she stopped pretending. That's not evil, it's nature. She never said forever, she never said stay. But he needed the illusion, so he painted her pauses with poetry. A glance became a vow, a smile became destiny, and every silence, he turned it into a whispered promise she never made. He gave meaning to her moods, eternity to her affection. He thought every kiss carried a covenant, but women love in moments, not monuments. She gave him presence, he built a future. She gave him seconds, he wrote years. She didn't deceive him, he completed the fantasy. She existed in immediacy. He lived in projection. When she touched his hand, he saw a home. But to her it was just contact. And when she looked away, he felt betrayed by a commitment she never offered. It was never what she said, it was what he wanted to hear. And his mind, desperate for story, filled in the gaps. Every silence became a sentence, every absence a test. But she wasn't building a bond. She was simply moving through time, unburdened by his hopes. He mistook her consistency for commitment. He thought repetition meant roots, but some women don't plant, they pass through. They bloom, they burn, they vanish. And if you try to hold them, they turn to smoke. The tragedy wasn't her detachment. It was his refusal to see it. She didn't lie. He just believed too hard, too soon, too much. And the more she drifted, the more he chased the ghost he'd named forever. You see, men like him fall not for women, but for reflections. She reflected something sacred, connection, safety, possibility, but reflections can't hold you, and mirrors crack when you lean too hard. His heartbreak wasn't betrayal, it was gravity catching up with illusion. She fulfilled her role, he assigned her meaning, and now staring into her silence, he realizes she never abandoned him. He abandoned himself the moment he decided she was the one. He was stable, he was kind, he was there, but she loved the man who wasn't. The one who didn't call, didn't beg, didn't break. It shattered him. He gave her everything, presence, safety, softness. She gave him thank you smiles and vacant stares, then chased the one who gave her nothing but silence, not because he was better, but because he was untouchable. You see, it's not goodness that awakens desire, it's gravity. She felt his absence more than she felt your presence, not because he was worthy, but because he was whole. A man who doesn't need her becomes a man she can't ignore. He confused effort with value. He thought if he just did more, she'd see. But desire isn't built through deeds. It's triggered by mystery. The man she wanted didn't try. He existed, and that was enough. She saw his indifference not as cruelty, but as strength. He didn't flinch when she tested him. He didn't perform when she cried. He didn't apologize for his edge. And that resistance, it lit something in her she couldn't name. A man who stands still while she storms, that's the man she dreams of. Because he's not controlled by her chaos. He doesn't orbit her moods. He isn't seeking approval. He's serving a mission. and that mission becomes more seductive than any compliment. He was the man she couldn't move, and in that immovability she saw what the kind man lacked: power. Not the violent kind, the silent kind, the kind she could lean on, but never bend. So the good man watched her walk away, not because he failed, but because he mistook being needed for being chosen. She didn't want help. She wanted heat. She wanted to melt against something unshakable, and he was just too available. He started strong, clear eyes, sharp edge, a mission in his chest. Then she smiled and he softened. Bit by bit he shrank, not because she asked him to, but because he thought that's what love demanded. He skipped the gym to hear her talk about coworkers. He let go of solitude to avoid seeming distant. He agreed when he disagreed, just to keep the peace. And every time he bent, she leaned less, until he became weightless in her eyes. She didn't betray him. She just stopped pretending to desire a man who disappeared himself. She met the edge, then watched him dull it for approval. She stayed just long enough to confirm the death, then left, not because he changed, but because he did. He thought the sacrifice was noble. But real women don't crave martyrs. They crave mystery, gravity, fire. She didn't want him soft. She wanted him whole, and he mistook performance for intimacy. He used to walk like he knew something. But with her, he second-guessed everything. His yeses were tentative, his no's negotiable. And deep down, she saw it. The slow collapse of a man who once had direction. She said, "You've changed." But what she meant was, "You've become too predictable." She needed to feel his spine, not his surrender. She wasn't attracted to his compliance. She was seduced by the tension he used to carry. When a man abandons his own edge to keep a woman, he becomes the very thing she walks away from. Because love that cost your essence is never sustainable. She didn't love who he was. She loved what he was willing to kill inside himself for her. And when the mystery died, so did her desire. So no, he didn't lose her. He lost the part of himself that didn't beg, the part that moved with purpose, not permission. She left because he did. And now, his rebirth begins not in her return, but in reclaiming the man she never really met. He thought the quiet meant calm, that her silence was softness, not distance. But in truth, every still night was a step away. She wasn't present. She was preparing her exit, and he, still hoping, didn't hear the clock ticking. She smiled less, touched less, talked less, but not out of coldness, out of completion. Her emotional bags were already packed, and he mistook the absence of conflict for the presence of connection. She wasn't at peace. She was detaching. A woman who's gone inside will leave you long before her feet do. Her kiss becomes mechanical. Her gaze turns vague, not out of cruelty, but closure. And he kept asking, "Is everything okay?" while the goodbye played on loop in her silence. He thought love had settled. But what he felt wasn't stability, it was erosion. She didn't argue because she no longer cared to win. She didn't cry because she'd already cried alone. And her silence wasn't affection, it was resignation. He replayed moments, trying to find the rupture. But the fall didn't happen in a moment. It happened in the pauses. She gave signals in sighs, in shorter replies, in turned shoulders. But he kept showing up with hope, and that hope made him deaf. By the time she left, she'd already survived the grief. She was mourning him, while he still believed in us. He was catching up to a heartbreak she had already metabolized, and her final touch wasn't connection. It was closure, a ritual, not a reunion. The tragedy of the modern man is mistaking stillness for safety. He thinks if she's not yelling, she's content. But sometimes the most devastating truths are told in what isn't said. Silence isn't absence of conflict. It's often the burial ground of love, and he, unknowingly, became its caretaker. So when she walked out, it wasn't a decision. It was a completion of a process he never noticed. Her silence wasn't peace. It was a countdown, and the clock had been ticking long before he heard the door close. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. She called him safe. She called him kind. She said he was everything I ever wanted, but her eyes no longer burned. And the man who once thrilled her became her comfort zone. Those words, "You're the one," felt like a crown at first, but later they sounded like an obituary. She wasn't loving him. She was labeling him. The compliments weren't ignition. They were eulogies for a fire already dead. He thought being safe was a virtue, but she didn't crave safety. She craved sensation. And while he offered peace, another man offered tension. She didn't cheat with her body. She disappeared with her hunger. He became her sanctuary. But no woman wants to live in the temple she no longer worships. He asked why her touch felt different. She said she was tired, but in truth, she was starving. And he wasn't the feast. She kissed him like a routine, not a revelation. He mistook her loyalty for love, her habit for heat. And when she said, "I love you," she was really saying, "I remember when I did." There is a specific kind of hell for the man who gets everything she said she wanted and still loses her to someone who gives nothing she asked for, because women don't fall for their checklist. They fall for the ones who ignite something wordless, something wild. He wore her compliments like armor, but they became shackles. He stopped evolving the moment she said, "You're enough." And that's when she started drifting, because even enough eventually becomes invisible. So no, she didn't cheat in the way most understand. She cheated in silence, with her apathy, with her boredom. And the man she abandoned wasn't him. It was the version of him she once admired. He thought he wanted romance, intimacy, passion, a future. But beneath all of it was a boy staring at a locked door. He didn't chase women. He chased permission. Permission to be held, heard, healed. She wasn't his lover. She was his emotional parent. And that weight broke her. She didn't sign up to be his therapist, his confessional, his mother. But every time he collapsed into her arms, that's what she became. And eventually, she resented the boy hidden in the man's body. He didn't seek her body for desire. He sought it for redemption, to feel safe in the place he once felt rejected. She became the warm substitute for a cold childhood. But a woman's love can't rewrite the pages his mother never filled. He thought loving her would fix him. But he wasn't loving her. He was reenacting something ancient. When she comforted him, he confused it with bonding. When she corrected him, he heard maternal disappointment. She was never just her. She was the ghost of unmet needs. The tragedy? She didn't even know why she felt so drained. He was kind. He was present. But it never felt like partnership. It felt like parenting. She held space until she couldn't breathe in it. And he, unaware, mistook her exhaustion for distance. He didn't want sex. He wanted to be soothed. He didn't want conversation. He wanted to be chosen unconditionally. He didn't need a partner. He needed proof that he mattered. But love isn't adoption. And no woman can be both muse and mother without burning out. She escaped, not because he was bad, but because he was heavy. She tried to carry him, but couldn't carry his past. And he collapsed when she left. Not because she was gone, but because his emotional survival system was gone. She wasn't just her. She was his substitute salvation. And now he sits in the aftermath, confused, angry, abandoned, not realizing she didn't leave him. She escaped the burden of being his origin story's rewrite, and the only way out is to finally grieve the love he never received. So he stops begging women to give it. So now you've seen it. The wound, the pattern, the mirror. She wasn't the beginning. She wasn't the end. She was the echo of something older. And you tried to build a life around an echo. But ask yourself this: what if she never truly left you, because the version of you that needed her still hasn't left you? What if every woman you chased was just your unconscious trying to get your attention? And what if the love you wanted was never really about her, but about the part of you that never got to grow up. You don't need to move on. You need to go back. Back to the place where you first believed you had to earn affection by disappearing. Because until you do, every touch will feel like a test, every silence like a sentence. So burn the fantasy, reclaim the edge, become the man who doesn't beg for reflection because he embodies it. If this truth struck a nerve, subscribe, turn on notifications, and keep walking this path of brutal self-knowledge and emotional freedom. If this broke your illusion, wait until you see what Schopenhauer said about why she chose you and why she stopped. Her instinct wasn't romantic, it was selective, and once you see it, you'll never chase the same way again.